Hi everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Valentina and I'm here from Community Language Co-op. I'm a simultaneous interpreter here to provide language justice for tonight's event. Language justice is a type of interpretation that seeks to create spaces in which no one language is dominant. To achieve this objective, we will be using Zoom's interpretation feature. What you will see in just a few minutes is a new icon appear at the bottom of your screen that looks like a globe. When you see it, click and three options will appear: English, Spanish, or off. Choose the language that you speak, that you wish to speak and listen in, or off if you're fully bilingual. On a phone or a tablet, these options will be by clicking on the three dots in the upper right-hand corner. Hola a todos, a todas y a todos. Gracias por tenerme aquí. Mi nombre es Valentina y estoy aquí por parte de Community Language Co-op para ofrecerles justicia lingüística en la sesión de esta noche. La justicia lingüística es un tipo de interpretación que busca crear espacios en los que no dominen ningún idioma. Para lograr este objetivo, utilizaremos la función de interpretación de Zoom. Lo que verán en unos minutitos es que aparecerá un nuevo icono en la parte inferior de su pantalla que parece un globo terráqueo. Cuando lo vean, hagan clic en él y verán aparecer tres opciones: inglés, español o apagado. Elige el idioma en el que desee escuchar y hablar, y en un teléfono o en una tableta estas mismas opciones están en los tres puntos en la esquina superior derecha. So a couple of things to remember is that I am interpreting simultaneously, so please be aware of your speed and to mute yourself when you're not participating. Algo que recordar y que tener en cuenta es que estoy interpretando de manera simultánea, así que tenga en cuenta su velocidad y su claridad y silencie su micrófono cuando no esté participando. Okay, let's go ahead and turn on the channels and make sure that they work. Listo, vamos a probar los canales para asegurarnos de que funcionen. Les pediré si me escuchan.
Buenas tardes. Good evening, everybody. My name is Martha Lochamin. I'm a Boulder County Commissioner representing District 2, and we just want to give a warm welcome and thank you to everyone who is participating this evening. This is an additional meeting in regards to the US 287 Corridor Coalition, and we appreciate you joining us this evening. I want to just make sure that everybody knows that the input that you give is so important. And we believe, and I'm supporting 100% as the other commissioners and our entire board, really the importance and the value of addressing together sustainable, affordable, and equitable mobility options. This is really important for all of us who live along and are neighbors of the US 287 corridor. And we're hoping that you'll participate and provide your ideas and your suggestions so that your hopes and expectations for this collaborative process will come together as we all work together. I do want to just talk a little bit about the purpose of this coalition. As we continue to work together, the goal is to foster ongoing collaboration and dialogue among all of the communities to develop a shared vision for the US 287 corridor and to provide guidance for this phase. So the planning process, as well as to help set the stage for the future phases for all of us together. So we're excited and we appreciate you taking the time to participate. I'd like to turn over our event this evening about the US 287 Corridor Coalition to Ed Parks, our transportation planner from the project team. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Commissioner. So what we're gonna do to kick this meeting off is just give you some virtual meeting format, just for those of you who haven't participated in one like this. Like we've mentioned already, we're going to have the meeting presented in English and in Spanish audio. You can click on the button down there at the bottom to do that. We are recording the meeting. All comments will be public record. You are muted at the moment, and we're asking that you do all questions through the Q&A button down there at the bottom as well. If you could please keep your comments, concerns, and questions as specific as possible and relevant to the project, that'd be great. So just webinar participation, as I mentioned before, you get this little bar at the bottom, and you may have some of these buttons, some of them may not be on your screen, but like I said before, we really want to get the Q&A in that Q&A function there. So if you can click on that to do the questions, that'd be great. We'll be tracking them there. There's going to be a separate section once we're through the main presentation with a lot of time for you to, we're going to field those questions with the project team, and there'll be answers. We are going to record those, like I said, and we are going to put up the NFAQ, or frequently asked questions, up on the webpage once everything's published. So don't worry if your question is not answered during the meeting. We will get to it. It will be posted to the website. And like the commissioner said, we really want your input. So if you can go to our website, boco.org/287 planning. Currently, where you went to register for the meeting, just below there is a survey. It is in English, it is in Spanish, and it'd be great if you could fill that out. We are going to be doing some polling questions that will have some similar questions than what's in the survey, but we really appreciate you filling out the survey and participating that way too. Just to give you a quick rundown of what we're going to do in the meeting, our agenda here is we're going to do a quick project overview and update. We're going to look at our bus rapid transit feasibility analysis and where we are, and then we're going to identify our next steps and get you going from there. And with that, I'm going to hand this off to Deputy Director of Planning, Kathleen Brt.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you this evening, and it's really exciting to be having this public meeting for the US 287 corridor planning process. So again, we're very glad that you're here. This is a very important project for all of us to be working on. This has come forward from the Boulder County Transportation Master Plan that was recently updated. It's also been a long-standing high priority project for the Northwest area. It was identified as one of the top tier corridors from the Northwest Area Mobility Study that was completed a number of years ago. So it's very exciting to be here, to be working on this with all of you, and to be listening to the priorities for from the communities along US 287 and people who are using the corridors today. One of the things I think is important to think about when we're envisioning the future of US 287 is the network that it provides. When we look at the map that's in front of us tonight, 287, the orange line that is that north and south spine that links together all of our other high priority regional corridors. So it's connecting to State Highway 119 in Longmont and connecting to Colorado 7 and connecting to the others all the way through the Broomfield community, connecting to US 36. So it really creates that important leg of the triangle to start creating much more opportunity for travel options and choices for people throughout our Northwest region and Boulder County. So I'm very excited that we're here. It's a long time in the coming, and it's really the time to be moving forward, and a lot of good work's been done to date, and we certainly have more work to do in front of us, and we're anxious to hear your information to help guide that work with us. If I could have the next slide, please. So when I think about this project, again, not only the important place that it serves in the network of mobility, it's really about the collaboration to get here. And so while I represent the Boulder County team that's working on this project, we're working very closely in partnership with our colleagues and from the city and county of Broomfield. And so this is really all about collaboration with all of our agencies, Boulder County, the local communities, city and county of Broomfield, and others. So at this point, I'd like to hand it off to my colleague, Sarah Grant from the city and county of Broomfield, to talk more about our partnerships and collaboration together. So take it away, Sarah, thanks.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good evening. I'm Sarah Grant, Transportation Manager with the City and County of Broomfield. And Kathleen did a great job of highlighting the regional transit network that we're trying to build here in the Northwest. Boulder County and Broomfield and many other communities in the Northwest have been working on building this vision of a robust network of multimodal transportation for over 20 years as a part of the Northwest mayors and commissioners alongside RTD and CDOT. US 287 is a key corridor connecting US 36 and Broomfield Station to Lafayette, Erie, Longmont, and beyond. We're pleased to be a part of this collaborative partnership with Boulder County. And this evening, I do want to acknowledge that joining us tonight is our new RTD District I Representative, Director Davidson, and I'd like to afford him the opportunity to also say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Am I coming through okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
My
Director.
apologies. I am in with mobile phone this evening, but it is great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. As has already been very well stated by Kathleen and by Sarah, this is a really high priority in the NAMS. It's a very major arterial. The connections in this region from east to west as well as north to south that we have ahead are very, very exciting. I'm happy to help in any way that I possibly can, and thank you very much for having me here this evening.
My name is Jeff Butts, and I'm the project manager for Boulder County for this project. And I just want to thank all of our wonderful partners for the collaboration on this. City County of Broomfield, but then we also have Longmont and Erie and Lafayette and RTD and Fort Collins and Community Solutions. And we've been working with FTA and CDOT. So thank all of our partners. Definitely takes a partnership to make this work. Next slide, yes. So I'm going to give a little update here. First, I'm going to just briefly talk in Spanish in case people missed the top here. Si prefieren español, tenemos esta presentación en los dos idiomas, en inglés y español. Y hay un globo abajo que dice interpretación y puede cambiar de inglés hacia español si quieren escuchar esa presentación en español. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the project. This project really has two portions to it. We are looking at an area that is viable for capital projects. And that area is between Longmont on Highway 66 in the north of Longmont down to Broomfield at 36. So in that area, we're looking at both service adjustments and we're looking at any type of capital treatments that can be done at intersections or along the corridor itself. And then beyond that little area, there is existing services with connections up to Fort Collins and into Denver. And so we are also looking at those services to look at the whole corridor as in its entirety and what we can do for services as well. Next slide, please. And so to give a little bit of an update on where we have been, we had in the previous public input section, we did a survey, and here you can see results of the survey. When people were asked why they're interested in this, most people live along the corridor or visit businesses along the corridor. And then you can see that most of the people are traveling it daily or at least weekly. And then on the transit side of things, about half of the respondents, more than half of the respondents say that they either rarely use transit or they don't use transit at all. So I think there's some opportunity there. How can we make transit more attractive? Next slide, please. Oh, here we go. Great. And then the things we can do to help increase the attractiveness of the bus is to make it faster for people, increase the frequency that it comes, and also increase the reliability and make safer and more amenities around here. And then when you look at the intersections, you can see that Arapahoe and 52 and some other ones really came up, as well as pedestrian crossings at the intersections has kind of been a theme that we've been hearing. Looking at the different types of treatment options that can be done, this is a little technical, but people through the survey have really helped figure out what we need. And we've learned, for example, that bikes are important as well, and they're not being addressed yet. So, and then when we look at general favorability to BRT improvements along this corridor, we could see that 83% plus of the respondents said that they were in favor of investing in the corridor. Next slide, please. And so, sorry, this slide's a little crowded. We're trying to do English and Spanish in one, and it's something new for us. So you can see here the strengths. I'm not going to go over a lot of these, but essentially the things that Kathleen talked about, the corridor, the network, all of the work and the support behind it. It is designed mostly for the car, which makes it a little difficult. Of course, the bicycling facilities, we've been hearing quite a bit about a need for those. There's opportunities to look at future developments and have them more maybe transit oriented. And then also looking at that bicycling and what we can do to help encourage and enhance that experience. And then throughout the process, we have to think about funding and how we can be funded through here, as well as some others. Next slide, please. And so with that, at this point, I believe I'm going to hand it over to Nick Vanderquack with the consultant team to talk about how they are looking at analyzing the existing roadway configuration. So Nick.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Like Jeff said, my name is Nick Vanderquack. I'm with AECOM Transportation Project Manager on the consultant side of things for the project. What you see on the map in front of you here is basically an assessment of what's out there right now. So what type of roadways run through. It's a very long corridor, and it varies quite a bit throughout. There are some stretches that are urban and have a Main Street feel in Longmont, and that changes as you move through the city. And then there's a very long stretch of rural shown in blue here, which is very different from the other sections. And then as you go through Lafayette and Broomfield, the character changes again. So looking at things like number of travel lanes, are there sidewalks, is there on-street parking? It's something that we've been taking into account and will influence the recommendations as we assess the feasibility of BRT on the corridor. Part of this process, we've done quite a bit of data collection and analysis, and we have an existing conditions report that goes over some of that will be publicized soon here. From a traffic side of things, we've done some data collection, which has been a little tricky in 2020 due to COVID, but we have a lot of traffic counts from before COVID and some traffic counts during, and we've got a process going through to take a look and see what the traffic looks like throughout the corridor, and then specifically at intersections, what it looks like and how much delay is there now and will be there in the future, and how specific BRT bus rapid transit improvements might influence that as far as bus travel times and car travel times. The key intersections that are currently experiencing the largest amount of delay, we've got 6 listed here, but the bolded ones are kind of the more delay of the ones that were been evaluated are really looking at Baseline, the Northwest Parkway, where that joins up with 287, and then Isabel Road. There are other areas of congestion, but these are the key points. And as part of the recommendations, we'll be looking at these in more detail to come up with specific treatments that might improve things for a variety of users. So I'm going to transition into really the BRT feasibility analysis. That's the portion of the project here where we're taking a look at how we're organizing, what improvements could be made where, and what impact that might have upon the area. So to start out, just to give a little BRT primer, I think most people joining this meeting may know bus rapid transit and think of things like the Flatiron Flyer on US 36. Or other bus implementation throughout the country and around the world. But really it's different than local bus service in that it's faster, it's more reliable, and it can move more people. And it does that through a variety of design treatments that are done that I'll mention in the next slide. It can offer a lot of the same amenities and travel times, sometimes even faster travel times than rail, at a more cost competitive price point. It's also a lot more flexible in that you can divert from one route to another and have multiple service patterns. And it's scalable to fit the needs of different communities depending upon what's going on there. Often bus rapid transit will transition along high ridership bus corridors. It's improvements that are made to high ridership bus corridors that connect some of the major regional destinations that are in the area. A few of the typical improvements that are implemented to create bus rapid transit, it's really, it's kind of a menu of options, I'll say, in terms of you could do a few of these or all of these, and each one of these kind of offers a different level of improvement. But really the typical ones when you think of true bus rapid transit are thinking about dedicated transit lanes where the bus operates independent from traffic and isn't subject to any levels of congestion. People being able to pay for their tickets before they board the bus so that the bus can operate very quickly when it picks people up. And at the stations as well as looking at different boarding ways that people board the bus, whether that's multiple doors or boarding at near level boarding. And then the vehicles, the buses themselves, the way those operate and function, as well as how they look, the branding, are very important towards BRT routes. And then lastly, but not leastly, is looking at some levels of intersection improvement. As I had talked about earlier, is looking at how the signal can prioritize the bus movement, or how the queue jumps or the lanes around an intersection for a bus to operate can help the bus move through quicker. So I'm going to transition here from the Brt Primer now into the process that we've been following in our project. And I'm going to walk through each one of these steps with you just so you can understand kind of it's on the more technical side of things, but it's the process that we're following that really builds up into how you're going to evaluate different types of improvements to see how successful certain things might be, how much certain things might cost, and what level of impact they might have or improvements upon the community. So we're going to walk through the goals, which we've been working very closely with the stakeholder working group, which is what was mentioned on the slide earlier, all the partners on the bottom of the screen here. A lot of important conversations and coordination has happened at that front, as well as the first public meeting. Getting input there was to develop 4 goals that are listed here. And I'm just going to read those to you so that we can kind of revisit this a little bit. But to increase the efficiency and attractiveness and utilization of transit for all users. Goal number 2 is providing competitive transit travel to serve different local and regional travel demand. So that this can do that in different ways. Goal number 3 is contributing to a socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable network. And goal number 4 is to develop and select an implementable and community supported project. Now, for each one of these goals, there's several objectives that we've got defined and will be part of the document that we're putting together at the end of this project. But there's a lot of steps that have come to create these in more details about what we want to achieve with this project. With that, once those goals are defined, we've really been focusing on how are we going to evaluate the various alternatives that we're defining as part of this process. I've got a few of them listed here. We've got a whole spreadsheet full of these things that are very data-driven measures of how the community feels, measures of a lot of different aspects of what type of impact each of these might have on the corridor. But the biggest ones to mention here are looking at the travel time for the bus and for other vehicles on the corridor. Sometimes making improvements for one mode might make the other one not function as well, and so they don't always track exactly with each other. Looking at bus ridership. So how well do the various alignments or alternatives that we're looking at, how do those serve the existing bus riders that are out there right now, but also new riders that might be attracted to something that works better for them? Looking at equity impacts, so how well the improvements are distributed between all people in terms of serving the areas of high need. Looking at traffic impacts, as I discussed earlier, in terms of improving traffic from a various multimodal perspective, bikes and pedestrians, as well as cars and the bus itself. And then looking at the adjacent land use, whether that's benefiting existing land use or whether maybe it spurs new development or economic development that might happen as part of that. And then the last 2 here, cost effectiveness, is really looking at how much does a specific improvement cost versus what benefit it provides to the community. And then lastly, what's really important for the process is measuring both the stakeholders from the communities listed below, as well as the general public. And that's why we're meeting with you tonight here too, is to gauge the support that is provided for each of these. Our process involves using that criteria and then going through a 2-tiered screening process to determine which and measure each of the various alignments and aspects that we're looking at. The first tier is looking at alignments, and that is a lot of what we're focusing on tonight. We've really broken the corridor up by community. Within each community is to take a look at how the bus could route through those areas and looking at the process of evaluating which routing makes the most sense. And then the tier two screening process is really focused on the level of investment. So are we going to do dedicated bus lanes? Are we going to improve the intersections as discussed before with signal priority and other things like that? and then also looking at service patterns. So Jeff mentioned up front, the corridor from Longmont down to Broomfield is really the core capital investment area where we're proposing BRT type improvements. We're evaluating them, but we're also looking at services that connect up to Fort Collins and down to Denver and evaluating those as part of the process to see what the impact is of having bus routes that run a one-seat ride all the way through or terminate in Broomfield with an easy transfer. And so we'll be evaluating that in that tier 2 screening process. So I'm going to walk through by community, and then we're actually going to shake it up a bit and have some polling. So we want to get some input from everyone here. So I'll talk about that when we get to after the first community here. But really, this map on the left here is showing the area in green here is the area we've been focusing on with the full corridor. And we wanted to determine where deviations from 287 make the most sense. A lot of 287, there's really not a lot of other options to get through, especially in the rural sections. But when you get to some of the communities along the way, there are some parallel alignments or other alignments that might make more sense than staying directly on 287, and I'll talk about those here in a second. So to start with the first community on the north, I'm going to start talking about Longmont here. And we've broken, Longmont's been doing quite a bit of work looking at BRT as part of the 119 BRT process, which some of you may be familiar with, connecting Boulder up to Longmont. So they have a pretty good background and understanding of what needs to be done or what they want to do and what's desired within Longmont. But we've really divided the various options into 4 different alternatives. And I'll just walk through those here briefly so everyone can understand, and then we're gonna do some polling to see what some of the preferences are. So alternative 1, which is the green alternative shown here, is really just staying on 287 on Main Street through Longmont. It's the most direct without any turns. However, there are some competing uses on that roadway with some of the downtown businesses and parking and the operations of that street, maybe some extra congestion. Alternative 2 is this orange route, which at Boston Avenue on the south part of Longmont, it deviates from Main Street and cuts over to Pratt Parkway and then cuts up over the railroad with a grade separated crossing. So it's not subject to any delay with the rail. And then it joins up to Kaufman Street, where Longmont is planning as a bus transit way for a variety of buses that come through here. All the way up as far as it can go up to 11th, and then cutting back over to 287 and continuing service north. Alternative 3 and 4 are some variations of using Kaufman Street. And so alternative 3 is the blue alternative here, and it cuts over and goes over at first and comes back at 11th, similar to how the alternative 2 comes over at 11th. And then alternative 4 is really the shortest deviation, but it's utilizing those core improvements that Longmont's planning on Kaufman Street. So I'm going to pause it there. I think we have some polling coming up. We'll see how this works, and Ed is going to read us through, and it's in English and Spanish, so it's a little longer than, you may have to expand your screen a bit here, but yeah, pass it over to Ed to walk us through that.
Thanks, Nick. So as Nick said, we're going to do a quick poll here. So you've got the English and Spanish. So the first section here is in Spanish. The second one here is in English. And so of the four alignments in Longmont, which one do you prefer? So we have alternative 1 for Main Street, alternative 2 for Pratt Parkway and Kaufman Street, alternative 3 for Kaufman from First Street to 11th, and then alternative 4 from Kaufman from 3rd to 9th Street. So if y'all can just give you a couple minutes here and just answer question 1. Let's stick to that. I think our polls all came up here in 1. So might need to see if we can close this one and come back to it. But if not, we'll go back to the chat. So if we answer this one, if you all can just type the answer to which alternative you like in the chat, we'll record it that way. Because it looks like, as we're seeing here, is that you can't like you have to answer all 3 questions in order to do the polling. So let's do it that way. Sorry for the little technical difficulty here. And then we'll try and open up the poll again when we get through Lafayette, and we'll just do this a bit virtually and manually at the same time.
We run with the punches in these virtual meetings.
All right, well, that's going on. Nick, why don't you move us on to our next alignment and see if we can open up the poll again so we can talk about Lafayette.
Let's do that. And Jeff, if you want to chime in on the poll at all, please feel free to speak up. But I can move on to Lafayette. And we'll go, if we need to, we can come back to these slides for another poll if we want to get a map with that. But in Lafayette, really coming in from the north, starting in the north, coming to the south, I guess. The buses run both directions. But there's 3 different alternatives. And I'd say within each of these alternatives, there are some sub-alternatives. A lot of the ways that the bus is routed depend upon, or could be routed depend upon some service planning, whether a particular route might stop in Lafayette and then turn around and go back the same direction it came from, or if a bus is continuing all the way through. So the first alternative is staying on US 287, and that's the blue one shown here. It's definitely the fastest way through Lafayette. It is the most direct by staying on 287 and not having any turns. There are fewer existing destinations on 287 versus some of the other alignments here. It's designed to move people, move cars, move vehicles. And so the bus would also move quickly or more quick through that section. The other second alternative here shown in purple is deviating off of 287 onto public road and then over baseline road to get back to 287. The main benefit of this alternative is, and there are existing RTD LD routes on one of the service patterns that takes this route, but it's to connect to the existing businesses and retail that's located along public road. It brings people closer to destinations. The distance between public road and 287 in some of these locations is, I would say it's a little far to walk. It is walkable depending upon how far people want to go, but it creates a much more direct route to get to those destinations and residences that live within the core of Lafayette using that purple route. One drawback to this is that it takes much longer for the bus to get through and it has more delay compared to just staying on 287. There's currently stop signs and signals that the bus would need to go through that it does not need to go through on 287. And also the existing roadway and is more constrained as far as how much space is available to make improvements or add different uses such as a dedicated lane or something like that, which would also have an impact towards the feeling and the character of the street, whether that's good or bad. It is an outcome of that alternative. And then the last one, I didn't mention the park and ride. That alternative 2 also serves the existing Lafayette park and ride. The last alternative 3 here is kind of, I'd say, a compromise. One of the big challenges with the existing setup of that park and ride is, and the land uses surrounding it, is that if you keep the bus on 287, you lose the impact of being able to have that park and ride serve this route. And also the people and developments that might happen next to that, they can't use this route unless there's other connections, other circulators or bus routes or other mobility options that connect. So this yellow option here is alternative 3, and it deviates from 287 and it cuts over on South Boulder Road, stops at the park and ride, and then comes back to South Boulder Road and either turns around or continues north. There's some service planning that will be done to maximize how these connections are made and some more details that could result from that. But those are the 3 options we're looking at in Lafayette. And so I'm going to open it back up. I'm not sure if the polling is working now. We'll maybe give it another shot.
Okay, so we're gonna have all three still up here. What we're gonna do is, like I said, just do it like we did the first one. So as you look at number 2 here, your three alternatives are for Lafayette is to stay on US 287. Alternative 2 is public road, and alternative 3 is US 287 with park and ride. If you could just answer those in the chat like we did, and we can go from there. Also, I just want to remind you, if you have questions about these alternatives as we go through them, please put your questions in the Q&A.
All right. So I believe it is not, the polling is not functioning. Is what I read here. Let's, if you're able to select and submit, please do that. Otherwise, we'll circle back at the end and do some additional discussion on the Q&A or do some additional polling if we can here. I'm going to move on to Broomfield, just south of Lafayette here. So yeah, please continue all your comments and questions on all of these as we move into Q&A. We want to have some good discussion at the end. So I'm going to roll through this so we can have time to do that. Broomfield, we're really looking at some service options for buses that connect to Denver or buses that are terminating in Broomfield and turning around and going back north again. Alternative 1 is that using the existing slip ramp on US 36 and following the same service that the Flatiron Flyer currently follows on 36. Alternative 2 is on the west side. It deviates off of it follows 287 on the west side of US 36 and uses Transit Way connecting up to the Broomfield station here. And then the last alternative 3, is for buses in a similar way that 2 is. It's for buses that are terminating in Broomfield and turning back around, but it's using an alignment that gets off of 287 and follows Commerce Street. It has some potential delay associated with crossing the railroad that we've notated here. It also has, when you look at the differences between the two, they have the capability of serving different people, both businesses and residences that are located on both sides. Just to mention, there is a pedestrian bridge existingly built there that easily connects both sides as far as people making transfers that would need to access either side. So we got polling on this. If we want to use the chat like we've been doing, unless we want to try polling one more time.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and use the chat like we've been doing. But just to run over the options again, alternative 1 is buses using slip ramps on US 36. Alternative 2 is west side of US 36 using Transit Way. And alternative 3 is east side of US 36 using Commerce Street.
Great. Let's continue to have folks chime in the chat. And I'm going to continue on so we can have that time to discuss at the end as well. So in addition to the alignments that have been just went over for each of the communities, there's other considerations when you look at stations. A lot of the existing bus stops, some have more ridership than others and are utilized more. When you look at BRT improvements, you start looking at minimizing the number of stations to have faster travel times, but also keeping enough stations to serve the needs of people along the way and allowing the BRT to function. So that stop spacing becomes pretty important when you look at the trade-offs there. Also, the land use surrounding each of the locations and existing bus stops and proposed bus stops that we're looking at is being considered. And then other major trip generators like the hospital in Lafayette or other major businesses that are located along the roadway as well. And then looking at through all this is looking at things with the lens of equity in terms of understanding the dynamics and the makeup of each of the communities and not preferencing one place versus another or one type of bus user versus another, but providing services for all. And then as part of this project, we are developing a stations area toolkit. And so that is in process, and we are working on that, and we'll be presenting on that during our next public meeting. But that stations area toolkit is really going to guide what types of BRT station improvements could be made on this corridor, as well as other locations in Boulder County. So we'll have some great information to share on that in the future here. And then lastly, looking at where those park and rides are located is a pretty important decision in terms, as discussed in Lafayette, but also in other areas. Both existing and changes to those are important to think through as we think about what might be successful. So that's all through the tiered one. Just briefly on tiered two, looking at what types of investments might be made. Just to help visualize a few of those, I wanted to go over some kind of types of improvements that might be made. So looking at the intersections, this graphic here showcases what a queue jump looks like. And so a bus that's in mixed traffic can come over to the right-hand turn lane and essentially jump through the intersection and kind of leapfrog ahead of vehicles that are traveling in the general purpose lane. Bus-only lanes are also another improvement that we'll demonstrate on the next slide here. And then as discussed, the station investment that happens is important. And then the service connections, as discussed, looking at those kind of major destinations. When we think about melding all the service together, thinking about things as a network and how we can best serve people to from where they're starting and where they're going to as part of the process that we're going through. Just to visualize in one location what some of these lane treatments looks like, we've put together a graphic. This is the Niwot Park and Ride, which is just one location on the route. It's a 90-foot right-of-way from edge to edge. So that's the existing pavement there is to work with. There's an existing bus stop located there. But when we look at what would happen if you were to put in some sort of dedicated lane or it's called a BAT lane, business access and transit lane. So an exclusive lane is, can be shown with paint as shown here, and the bus is the only thing running in that. This BAT lane over here would be shared with the right turn lane going on to Niwot Road, as well as people turning off of Niwot Road coming onto 287, their acceleration lane. And so there's some, that's all utilizing existing pavement, which is one benefit to making improvements like this in some areas. And then also in consideration, this is a feasibility study, so looking at all options of improvements, having the bus-only transit lanes running down the center of the road has a lot of different operational impacts. It does create a different type of environment. It also takes a lot more space. It has a bigger footprint than doing side running or other improvements, but it's another level of investment that could be made on portions or all of this route that could be considered as part of this process. So in summary, with that two-tiered screening process, we are hoping to walk through that as part of this feasibility assessment and evaluate the various alternatives to come up with what's the preferred alternative that we can continue forward with in the process that Boulder County is working with. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Jeff, who is going to talk about the next steps of this project. And after that, we're going to open it up to have some discussion or answer some questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. Appreciate that overview. You did a good job, and hopefully the visuals were helpful as well. Moving forward, we want to continue with the community engagement through various means, and one of those is reaching people where they are through community conversations. And so if you have a group that you would like me to attend to present on, have the conversation, it doesn't have to be this long of a presentation. It could be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour, however long. People have enjoyed having me come. So if you know anyone, please email me personally. My email will be at the end. We have a stakeholder working group who is helping guide this. Some of the members are here today. Thank you for joining. And they're helping really determine what is viable in the local communities. They're representatives from all of our partner municipalities and partner agencies. And they are helping determine really which alternatives we should move forward And some of the communities have already done a lot of planning, which is extremely helpful. And some of the communities, we still have a lot of questions to answer. And so their participation is real helpful. Additionally, they'll help with the stations area toolkit and figure out what we can do to make the stations more comfortable for people. And then we'll have a public meeting, another public meeting. It will be our final public meeting sometime prior to August. We're not sure exactly when that will be, but please look for that. And then it's prior to August, so we plan on wrapping this up in August. And then after we wrap this up, we're hoping sometime late this year, between September and October, maybe a little later, depends, but start the next phase of this study. And in the next phase, we're really going to focus on safety and multimodal mobility. And so how can we improve the safety of the corridor, really using that as our highlight? What have we learned from this study, and how can we mix the two together to come with the preferred outcome? So that is going to be coming up next. And then the next thing that I would just encourage you all to do, and sorry about the polling issue tonight, we don't use Zoom a whole lot, and so, nor the polling issue, and there was 2 different ways to go about it, and clearly chose the wrong way. So if you're ever adding polling into Zoom, you add a whole new poll each time. There's a little blue button at the bottom that is very enticing. Don't push that one. But please visit boco.org/287planning. We also have a survey up there available for people to take. So the questions that maybe didn't go as well in the poll tonight, you can answer them in the survey. So I would encourage all of you to please visit the website and then click on the link. And also we have it available in Spanish as well, if anybody is interested in taking Spanish, or this recording will also be posted to the website. I am going to share the results real quick of the polling just to see what it looked like, and this will help us move into the discussion area. So these certainly were wonky, but here is what we showed. Alternative 2 in Longmont, and then in Lafayette, there was real split between alternative 1, alternative 3. Again, alternative 1 was just stay on 287, which will be the very rapid. And then the second one was more of the alternative 3 was the mixed one, where we head over to the park and ride. And then there is some support for public road. It's just clearly trade-offs, and it's an extremely difficult puzzle. And then finally, in Broomfield, the final one down here is to use the slip lanes onto 36, or to use go to the existing bus bays. And the new option of using Commerce did not see any respondents saying that was the preferred one. And so with that, I will then turn it over to Ed to help MC some questions. Again, you can see my contact information, Ed's at the bottom. Please email if you have any questions. I also speak Spanish, so if anybody's a Spanish speaker, you can email me directly in Spanish. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ed, to MC the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. So we got a couple questions while we're doing the presentation. So one of the key ones that maybe Jeff, you or Nick can help us answer here is from David Hawes, talking about how we can prevent bus delays from the Broomfield bottleneck. He's talking about north-south routing on 287 through Broomfield. It's just going to be a bottleneck. So is that something that we've looked at, and how do we think we're going to address this with our analysis here and our recommendations in the project?
I could take a first stab at it, and Sarah, if you're still on, you may also want to help answer this. we're taking multiple level view at Broomfield. We're looking at the short-term operational stuff, and we're also looking at the long-term. There are some issues with the interchange there, and it turns into a bottleneck. And there's also issues at the bridge, which is super difficult. And that's how that third alternative came about in Broomfield, that bypasses it all. That may not be a good option though. Nick, do you want to add something, or Sarah? Maybe I'll hand it to Nick first, and then if Sarah wants to chime in.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really it's difficult when you have areas that are really congested, especially when you're space constrained. And so we're looking at opportunities for maybe there's some specific shoulders that could be used, you know, to bypass some of that congestion. It's not always possible with some of the bridges and some other constraints to do that. But yeah, the important thing is looking at, you know, thinking out of the box in terms of that. Jeff mentioned that third alternative, that, you know, you kind of bypass what's happening on the other side and what's happening in some of that congestion, but you introduce some new issues like the rail crossing and potentially having the perception that you're far away because you're on the other side of the bridge and that type of deal. But those are all things that we're thinking through as part of the process. And I believe Broomfield has some other thoughts on that too. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to chime in at all.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Nick. I think you both summarized it really well with the short-term fixes of what we can do in a more immediate fashion. But for the long term, it is in the US 36 environmental impact statement and study where we looked at the full interchange. So we're not done with that interchange yet. So one of the other aspects of completion is the bridge over BNSF for US 287 towards the interchange. And so that is in the long-term plans, and we continue to work with CDOT to let them know that is a priority to see that to completion, and we especially for access for transit. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. So another question we had here was sort of a question, maybe a question or a statement. The question was, Lafayette Park and Ride may benefit from a different location. So maybe Nick, can you talk about how we're looking at park and rides, and are we looking at them at different locations?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that we've been discussing with Lafayette. You know, that there's been some there's always opportunities when land uses are changing or when there's things being developed, and so those discussions are continuing on where a park and ride would best function. You know, both either on the north side of Lafayette or the south side directly on US 287. Those discussions are ongoing. I think if the bus was routed staying on 287, it would need to have some, if you want people to use it, that their only way to get there is to drive if they live too far to take a connecting transit or to walk. But that's the only way they can connect. You're not going to see them riding the bus if they don't have a park and ride option, or you might see them driving further down the road and not taking advantage of being taking their car off the road earlier. And so those are the types of things that want to be avoided. But definitely as part of this process, we're doing some brainstorming with Lafayette, and that's a continuing conversation, I'll say. I don't know if we have any of the stakeholders from Lafayette on tonight, or Jeff, maybe you want to add anything in from your perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm looking through our attendee list to see if we have anybody from Lafayette, and Juliet Woodson is on. So Juliet, I can allow you to speak if you would like to speak to everyone about this. I'm not sure how we could communicate that, but I will open it up for you, Juliet, to talk if you're okay. We putting you on the spot like this. And if you don't want to, you can just let me know as soon as I turn it on. So I'm opening it up to you, Juliet.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Hi. Thanks for giving me the chance to say a couple of words. So yes, to answer that question, we have been talking with the county and the team about the possibility of a second park and ride on 287. We have some ideas. So like Jeff said, the conversation is continuing, but we really want to figure out how to connect any new park and ride to our old park and ride, to give those folks that basically live in our downtown area a way to get to the new park and ride. So it's complex, but we see the issue and we're just trying to figure it out. So thanks, Jeff, for giving me a chance to speak.
And I'll just add, if there's any opinions or thoughts on that, please share that, whether that's in the chat here or taking the survey. There's some options for any ideas that we can evaluate as part of the process.
Great, thanks for jumping in there, Joliet. And Joliet is our local contact, but she works in Lafayette, so she's on the ground there. So definitely appreciate her chiming in on the spot. We only have a couple minutes left, so let's move on to some other questions. And please feel free to add any more of your ideas into our survey. Ed?
Thanks, Jeff. So maybe Jeff, you and Nick, can you guys just talk about how we're prioritizing rapid in terms of bus rapid transit? Is that, in terms of criteria, is that a priority? And is it how does it fit into our improvements and our recommendations?
So I can chime in there. I think a lot of the evaluation criteria is focused on speed of the bus and how fast you can get from one location to the next. And it's really important to look at a variety of portions of the route there, because not everyone's making the same trip or has the same goals in mind when they're taking their trip. And so the way that you structure things can benefit some people and not others in the same way. So rapid is a priority. That's one of the main things driving this project, is creating a corridor that is more attractive and that something that people want to use. So that's part of the goals of the project, and that's reflected in the evaluation criteria as well. So I'm happy to talk about that further with a follow-up question after this meeting or at some other point with David. Somebody asked that one. I think it was David asked that one, but yeah, please reach out if you want to chat more on that.
All right, we're right up against time, but we got one more question, and I think it kind of still relates to the rapid. So why isn't there a consideration of managed lanes similar to US 36 Flatiron Flyer service? I believe it helps gain broader support, additional cost, more acceptable if more people benefit, including people who don't use the lanes. So Jeff, maybe from your perspective of the county, is thinking about this project as a whole, was managed lanes considered at any point in the discussion at looking at this corridor?
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, Brt, I think is how you pronounce your name, for the question. When we look at that triangle, we look at 36 and we look at 119, those all have a couple of elements of the managed lanes and the bikeway. When we look at 287, there's a lot more free flow traffic along here, and a lot of the congestion is occurring at the intersections, as opposed to on 36 and 119 a little bit. You have a lot of congestion, a lot of points. I don't think we've necessarily ruled out any opportunity at this particular point. It's just a matter of what is the right tool for what we are seeing on the ground. And at this point, what we are seeing is a lot of the congestion occurs at the intersections, and a lot of this corridor is free flow traffic. But we're also looking at the bikeway and not ruling out any options. I don't know if Kathleen, you want to chime in on this, or we're okay leaving it there.
Jeff, I can chime in, and I know we're right at time. So I think it's a really important piece to bring up, because again, when we think back of where this corridor plan originated from out of the Northwest Area Mobility Study. That was the idea, is how do each of these corridors emulate the multimodal improvements like US 36 that include that combination of bus rapid transit, commuter bikeways, and then the managed express lanes. So as Jeff said, that's one of the things we're going to be looking at as we go forward, and what is the right technique for this particular corridor given the unique characteristics not only of today but what's forecast into the future. So all of those options are on the table. We're just starting with the look at the transit.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. Appreciate that. And with that, we'll wrap up this webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. Once again, I would direct you to boco.org/287 planning. Please take our survey on there. There's opportunities to comment and anything else that you wanted to say today that we didn't get to. You can also email either myself or Ed directly, or Nick directly, sorry. And we're happy to talk to you about this more in depth. So thank you all for joining us. We definitely appreciate it, and keep in touch. So thank you all.
And thank you,
Goodbye.
Jeff. Appreciate you organizing all of this and the whole team. So appreciate all your work tonight.
Great.
Thanks all.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.